today's a lot about turning within today too, because we know that we've raised the bar already, that we're living without limits. And isn't that the truth, that we really have, we're not in that poverty consciousness that you talked about. We're not in that consciousness of lack or limitation, but yes, we don't have those limits as we go to that place, as we go to that height of heights within our heart of hearts. And I think sometimes our life, we get so caught up in external things. Anyone ever get caught up in something that's going on in life? Yeah. It might be in our relationship. It might be in our finances. It might be in our health. We get caught up in those external things. And as we remember who we truly are, what we can do is today, right now, use this time to go deeply. And that as we look within, and that as we set aside some of those external things that are going on, we can look deeply within our own being. And we can take a moment to look at the spiritual process in our life. That we know that there's a creative process that's working out for us. It's working out for me, it's working out for you, it's working out for us. And it's working on our behalf. There's that energy which is always flowing, and we can take this time and we can share some time to really go deeply within, to give ourselves that gift, because it's already given. And so even if we do that after service today, even after Sean's workshop that he's going to have, beyond just this room, so we have that going deeply in this room, being inspired and knowing that everything is working out for good. And because I'm so sorry. We live our life by things in our life. It's like when I meditate, it's like, okay, well, don't catch that train. There might be something flying by, or don't. I see sometimes those thoughts that come in as birds flying by through the sky. So we can live our lives externally, and sometimes we get so busy, the deepest part of us doesn't get that attention. So we could be distracted by something, by the noises that are in our life. We could be distracted by certain things. And I just wanted to share a realization that I had as I was walking a path the other day. And I walk frequently. And sometimes I walk with an idea. Sometimes I walk just to be mindful to not have ideas, or to not have those external things that are going on. And so that I can then be clear and focus on what's really mattering in my life, what matters most in my life. And so I wanted to share a realization that I was invited to go hug some trees up in Colorado, and it was a beautiful thing. And I think the trees kind of hugged me back, and I got to have that warm embrace of nature. And just to be on that sacred path. And I had the realization that in this one moment I had like this life review, and it wasn't like I was getting ready to check out. Fortunately, I wasn't, on my way out. But it was like one of those aha moments that it was really nice to have that flash without having to check out. So in essence, I checked in. I got to check in on what was deep within me and what really truly mattered most. So I had this momentary life review in a way, and I got to review what was deep within my heart and to not pay attention to what those external things were. And, how many various things do we have going on in our life? And I realized, well, how long have I been walking on paths? And the paths may look different. It may look like having some trees upon it. It may look like out here on the bosque where there's some palisades. I was describing to somebody how there's the water. Oftentimes it's by a lake, it's by a river, it's by an ocean that I'm walking. And I was comparing the palisades that are up by the tree farm in Corrales. I was comparing the palisades up there that have this beautiful view. And it kind of gets us out of what our normal view in life is, and then we can bring that energy back, much like if we go on a mini holiday or a staycation, like today here in this room. We can have a staycation, and to then bring that with us after service, whatever that is. So we can have that larger view of life. And so I had this realization that, the path is the same, no matter what those external things are that are going on. I'm in that path of that deep divine love, and there's love and freedom and beauty that are always on that path, no matter what it looks like. So it might look like a view from the Palisades. It might look like me dipping my toes in the Rio Grande. It might look like a view of the wilderness. And so when I look at personal relationships, when I look at professional relationships, when I look at my relationship with my well-being, with my health, when I look at my relationship perhaps with my finances, I know that I'm walking that path. The path is that same approach. I have that approach that I am of love. I am of freedom. I am of beauty. And that as I go within and I don't take the direction from those conditions, I have that direction, that inner voice, that inner knowingness that there is love and freedom and beauty that is I can bring then to those external things. So I had that flash that the path remains the same. And even though those external things are different, that path is the same because it's filled with spirit. It's filled with that creative substance, that sufficiency and supply that is always there, that supply of energy that gives me that vibrant vitality and radiant love which I come forward with. And it's really about the path that's within us. So there's an inward journey. And in this inner journey, I can give myself that head nod or that internal high 10, high 5, no matter what shifts and changes in my life are happening. Because aren't we always having some shifts and some changes, and we're shifting gear, and no matter what that path, no matter what those shifts are, I know that we've been walking a certain path. And it's so easy to define our life by those external things. Yet they're not the source. So for instance, my bank account, the investments, however that shows up, that's not the source. I'm not taking direction from that. In essence, it's the other direction where I know that there's a source and supply and an infinite presence of energy that I bring to my relationships, to my health. I just have this complete body that knows what to do. I don't have to tell my autonomic nervous system what to do. You know? And it's so easy to define our life by whatever those externals might be. And sometimes we miss that we're really living on this deep inner journey. Sometimes we just miss it because we get involved in those the busyness, you know, when it's really about our unfoldment of our soul and the transformation that's going on all the time, that awakening that's happening, that there is the transformation, I get goosebumps, there is a transformation of the soul that's happening right here and right now. And so I just want to share about that aha moment and that flash that I have about those areas in my life. No matter if I was at the Palisades or if I was beside the river or beside a lake or looking at from a higher point of view, that there's that inward journey. And no matter what low points or high points that we have, we're still on the path. We're still coming from that place of love and freedom and noticing the beauty that's available. We're walking that path. Does anyone know what the highest and the lowest points are in the United States? We can say, I know what the lowest and the highest points are in my life, and we can take, right? Yeah, definitely, yeah. And so we can take that into account, that we have that journey, that inward journey, noticing even what those externals are. We can look at what those lowest points and those highest points are. So the lowest point and the highest point are both in California. One is Death Valley, that's the lowest point. And then the other one is Mount Whitney. And the whole journey of that is about 100 miles. And if we look at that journey, it's not that far. It's really not, it's not that far. But the distance between Lac, Death Valley, whatever that might look like if I'm having a shift or a change, there's some valley that's going on. Whatever that distance between, whatever that lack and limitation might be, to that greatest expression, to that high point, that 14,000 feet versus being at sea level or whatever level of that low point, there's that high point of our creative expression. So, and I'm only a consistent thought away from having that creative expression, go from that low point and move up toward the high point, right? So it's less than 100 miles. And so the distance between those low points and the highest points have us have that experience on that inward journey. And we can know that we have some consistent thoughts that take us there and that we can travel on that path because we're traveling already. There's the divine momentum that we can absolutely rely upon and to have that divine guidance within us. And until we're out of the valley, until we can notice how gorgeous that mountain is. And so as I look at the Rio Grande and we have the Sandia at how many thousands of feet? How high is Sandia? 10,000? Yeah. Yeah, so it almost doubles, it almost doubles that amount of faith that we can certainly know that mountains can move in our life with faith, that we can move from those low points to those high points. And I used to commute to a cabin in Idlewild, California, where our teens go to camp. And it was about 100 miles from where I was living in LA, so that was kind of horizontal versus the going from sea level to that high point of creative expression. But it was really a great reset. I got to reset and refresh and renew and restore and reinvigorate and just have whatever wanted to be revealed in my life. And I would take friends with me. I wouldn't just be on this journey alone, so I would go to the inward journey, and then I would have friends come up and they'd do some retreats and those kinds of things. And we would move from those low points to those high points together and to have that momentum like we do here in community. And the creative process is already in the flow. And so in Science of Mind, we talk about, and Science of Mind is a guide for spiritual living, founded by Dr. Ernest Holmes, and he talks about the creative process, and it's really just a few steps. That in the creative process, we look at the divine ideal. So we look at that high point of where we want to be, the divine ideal. And to move in a way that it's even beyond what Wayne Dyer talks about as far as we're spiritual beings having a human experience. I think we're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. Yeah. And it's okay if you don't buy in with that. I just wanted you to know where I stand, But we're spiritual beings. And we can think about those divine ideals and think about where we would prefer to be. And we can support our thinking with those affirmations that we have, with the affirmative prayer that we just did all together. We had our Sacred Covenant was much like an affirmative prayer. We have meditation where we can move from those external things that we have in our life, all the noise. We can move within and know that there's a journey that is happening that's empowering us as an essence of love and freedom and beauty. And we might show up as artwork. Some of our people here I was noticing on Facebook that they were doing their art thing and how brilliant and their creative expression, and that seemed like a real high point that was shining, and it just seemed lovely and it inspired me. Or we might be journaling. There's other ways that we can build upon this creative process so that as we step into that divine ideal, as we step from that low point, as that high point, as we step up in our life, we step up and move to the high point from that spiritual point of view, we step into the picture that we've created in our mind and our heart and our feelings, and knowing that what it feels like to be there. So we have that feeling tone that goes with that knowingness of those spiritual qualities of love and freedom and beauty that we're aspiring to move from whatever that low point is to the high point. And then we keep doing this, we keep being this essence until we notice what's shifted, what shifts in our external place. So that as we look at our Science of Mind symbol, which represents our creative process, we have the unity of the outside as far as what our oneness and our divine essence is, our spiritual nature, spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. And we keep doing this until we notice what we're envisioning. And then we keep on noticing how it shows up in our life. And that then we get to relax and enjoy a little bit even more because we're coming from that sense of that inward substance and sufficiency, that one source that is ever available. And so Dr. Ernest Holmes talks about when we're seeking to heal something in our life, he talks about that we turn our thoughts completely away from the situation, whatever those external things are. We go within, and so we turn within and look at the divine ideal, and to be open and receptive to the divine ideal making itself known. We might taste it, we might feel it, we might touch it, as if we're walking on that path already. The path is the same. We're the spiritual being that we've always been. And we're capable, and we deserve the very best. So the divine ideal of our life, whether it's our finances, our health, the perfect ideal, is whatever we imagine, we align our thinking and our consciousness with these divine ideals. And so that's the creative process. We are creatively expressing from that high point. And sometimes we get to kick it upstairs. Yeah, I may be feeling a little bit low. And so I get to kick it upstairs. I get to kick it. And I found this picture of these boys laughing. And oftentimes I get to use the material that's in my life and laugh like these guys and have a little bit more joy. And so each in our own way, we're learning, we're growing. We're growing sometimes. We're changing, we're awakening. And if you think about the joy that's in the faces of these boys, it could sum up that we're all having an inward journey. And that there's that path of spiritual living, and that we're awakening to what's being created in our life by that divine creation, that divine creator, and that we're all spiritual beings having this spiritual experience. We're created by Spirit. We're absolutely a creative expression already. And so, right here and right now, we are all that there is in invisible form, that pure potentiality filled with that power of possibility. There's that which is invisible at the top of the science of mind symbol, all spirit, that's moving itself into form. And there's one thing. There's not two things. Sometimes we think that there's something against us, so there's a dualistic, or it could be spiritual, or it could be human. And what I'm saying is that it's all one thing, that we're spiritual beings. And so there aren't two things. And I don't know if you buy that, but that's where I stand. And we don't lose any of our humanness in that, but we get to have that richness and that mixed up stuff that we do. We get to that messy stuff sometimes. We get to bring the spiritual essence to it and realize that, yes, we're awakening as the spiritual beings. And Brother Lawrence is a good example of this. And he wrote The Practice of the Presence of God, and what he began to do was to see the Creator in everything. He got to see that he was a part of this creative process. And what he did was, in France, he joined the army way back when because it would give him a meal. And he thought, oh good, I'm going to be taken care of, and I'll be of service. And then later on, he had some spiritual realizations. And he began to feel a deadness, like at the low point. He was really at a low point. He began to feel like a dead tree, like he just felt like he didn't have this life essence, and there was something that was missing. And there's times in our life that we feel that there's something missing. And he felt this deadness. He felt that there was something that was awaiting his recognition. And what he got to recognize was that God was awaiting his recognition. And he moved from that low point to a higher point, no matter what his external situations were. And he brought that creativity with him, and he knew that life would begin to reassert itself again. He knew that there was something life-affirming that was within him. And so he took an inward journey, no matter what his external circumstance was. And so he was changed. And he began to love God. He began to love the divine essence, the spiritual nature, which was so natural and was there already. It was there all along. He began to love God so much that even in his menial tasks, that when he joined a monastery later on, his menial tasks of dishwashing, of repairing sandals, they began to be filled with the presence. And everywhere that he looked was the presence. Everywhere that he looked was the divine essence. He was the spiritual being having a spiritual experience. So everything he did was an opportunity for him to practice the presence of God, to practice that presence. And so it didn't matter if it was a low thing like Death Valley. It didn't matter if it was a high thing like Mount Whitney. And in a way, he felt kind of pruned. And I don't know if you've been, I used to prune some roses, and I learned how to prune them so that they would then bloom again. And they have 3 leaves on the top, and then they have 4 leaves on the bottom. We have some, and by the way, the Garden of Eden, this is sunflowers, and thank you, Jane Mormon, for the arrangement. Sunflowers from the Garden of Eden that's out back here. Have you ever felt like you've been being pruned? You know, like something in our life has been pruning us. And so like Brother Lawrence had felt kind of like this dead tree, something needed to go and to be released, and so that then it could bloom again. And so in that pruning process, and there's seasons that we all have for that, and it could be that we move through a loss. It could be that we move through a diagnosis or a resetting of whatever that is, or whatever opportunities that we have to be transformed. There's that presence which is always there in that process of being pruned. And I went to Home Depot the other day, and I thought, well, I'm going to get some Vincas because they're bulletproof. I need those that are bulletproof. And even after I got them and they were pristine, I still needed to prune them a little bit and to give them lots of water to see that they were nourished and that they had enough sunlight. And so that if we feel like we're pruned, and whenever I prune plants, no matter how much we feel that we've been pruned by life, if it's a tragedy or if it's something that we're moving through, whether it's that very low point or high point or something in between, we get to know that then there's that bloomation that's happening, that blooming. Remember that word from a while ago? There's that bloomation that's happening. And we can bloom again. So Dr. Ernest Holmes talks about our soul blooming. And he talks about to not lose sight and to know that we can trust in the good, that we can trust in our spiritual essence. And he says that we should never lose sight of the fact that the soul is on the pathway of an endless and ever-expanding experience. We're on the pathway already. We're on the path of love and freedom and beauty. And he goes on, and that only by expansion can it evolve. And if we think about that, just if you take a moment to think about our soul expanding, isn't that refreshing? It's refreshing because it has a little breathing room. It has a little bit of refreshment and renewal in it. He says, this does not mean that we convert it into a greater good, accepting the lessons and experiences of the past and taking the best from everything. So sometimes we may cut that rosebud, and we may do it below those 5 leaves so that then we know it's going to bloom again, that as we prune it, we're conscious of it. We should press boldly forward, looking ever for the truth. We go to the high place in that creative process. And ever ascending higher and higher into the realm of reality. There is no limit to the possibility inherent in all people. There's no limit. Let the soul put its complete trust in good and press bravely on. So we can ask ourselves, if you want to just take a moment and turn within and ask ourselves, our inner self, the next step that we would like to take. So I invite us to turn within in this moment with a sense of love and freedom and beauty, and ask ourselves, what next step would we like to take? And to see ourselves taking that step and arriving there. And again, on this inward journey, I invite you to just go ahead and put your hand on your heart just for a minute, if you feel comfortable with that. And just ask yourself, what is the next step that my heart is calling on this beautiful path? Being a spiritual being. Knowing that there is an innermost guide, which is that which is infinite, and the intimate presence, that which is so energized and renewed and refreshed and filled with so much beauty and so much love. That there is grace, There is that which is the infinite presence, which is a very healing and revealing power, knowing that there is well-being in this healing and revealing that is revealing itself as beauty, as joy, as love, as peace, and knowing that there is this divine essence which is ever available, ever present, ever expanding. It is the awareness of spirit as itself. It is the creative expression. It is the creative juices which flow, knowing that there is the nurturing and nourishing and that empowerment which is ever available. And I know that I am connected and at one, at home in the heart of spirit, and that in this oneness there is the all good, the all power, the allness of the infinite presence. And this presence is ever available. It is who I am. And I know that my life is empowered and that I claim this and I know this to be so. So I'm grateful, and I notice and I begin to be aware, even more aware of how this shows up in my life and all around me, knowing that Spirit is in, through, as, and all around this thing called life. And I'm grateful for this knowingness and this essence, and as I proclaim and know that I release this word, knowing it is powerful, it is that which is the presence and power, which is the givingness and givenness of Spirit. In total love, I release it and know with the full confidence and poise and calm assurance that it is ever available and it is mine. And so be it, and so it is.